Stephenie Meyer, the woman behind the Twilight Saga explosion, says it all started 5 years ago with a dream.
The dream was great and it was cool, but the magic was then when I sat down and the words just started coming, and I could put it down on the page exactly the same way it had been in my head. I was in a rainforest coming up with what the vampires are going to say next, and it was just in my mind all the time. And I started keeping notebooks by my bed because when I would go to sleep, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with more ideas, so I'd write them down so I wouldn't forget.
So it's Friday, and we're live in Chicago with Twilight author Stephenie Meyer. I have to say, that was one heck of a dream. Had that ever happened to you before?
Never before, never since. It was really a one-of-a-kind thing, and I'm just glad I didn't waste it.
That you didn't waste it?
Yeah.
Did you know that, that the dream was meant to then become books?
Absolutely not. This dream was just something I was so interested in, and it so different from what my everyday was at the time. You know, something that was fantasy, and I just wanted to remember it so badly that that's why I started writing it down. Not because I thought this would be a great story for a novel. No, it's just I don't want to forget this story.
So, were you a person who journaled or...
No, and I have a hard time writing about myself. People who don't exist, I can write for hours, but for myself, it's like I just never know what to say.
So you've never written a short story? You didn't want to be a writer?
No, I studied literature, and I love to read, but writing to me seemed, well, first of all, everyone knows you can't make a living at writing, right? So why do something that's so impractical? And then, it seems kind of presumptuous to me, like that anyone else would want to read the things that are in my head. I never thought of it that way.
And so, how old were your children at the time?
Eli was 1, Seth was 2, almost 3, and Gabe was 5.
Wow.
They were little.
This was 6 years ago before, you know, before you hit the big time. And at the time, when you started writing it, then did you think, okay, maybe it will be a book?
I didn't think about that until it was finished, because in my head this was not something that I was going to finish. It wasn't a book in my head. It was just
you were just
thing.
Cataloging the dreams.
Right. Well, I did the dream, and then I wanted to see what would happen to them. It was just me spending time with this fantasy world. And when it was finished, it was like, this is long enough to be a book, even.
Wow. Now, you told my producers that you obviously weren't trying to write a bestseller, that you were trying to reconnect with yourself. And when they told me that, I really resonated with that, because I think so many women, I've done so many shows over the years with women who are doing the hardest job on earth, staying at home, taking care of their children, trying to do that well, and lose themselves sometimes in the process. Were you feeling that?
Well, I think that's part of the process. I think it's a necessary part. When your kids are little, their lives depend on you all the time, and you really have to just devote yourself to them. It's part of the job. And so who you are and kind of your imagination, all of that, you do have to put it on hold, especially when you're not getting any sleep at all, and you know, your energy level to be able to just get through the day, that's all you can manage. And so a lot of who I was and my crazy imagination and that person was on the back burner.
Was on the back burner. Had you always had a crazy imagination?
I did, but I didn't know that about myself. I thought everybody was telling themselves stories all the time. I thought that was what we did. Yeah. And apparently that's not normal.
No. And what seems abnormal is, like, you weren't a person who liked vampires or hated vampires or sought stories about vampires.
Yeah, that's I read everything except for horror. That was the one genre I just knew I was too chicken for. So I don't know how they got in my head, because I really wasn't thinking about vampires at the time.
So what did you grow up reading and that you loved?
I read a little bit of everything. When I was really little, my dad would read to us at night, and that was sort of my introduction to books. And he would always read what he wanted to read, so it'd be some big, thick book. And he'd stop at the most exciting parts. So I'd have to go into his closet in the daytime and flip through and read. And I sort of skipped over that whole phase, like, shouldn't I be in picture books? So when I was 8, I was reading Gone with the Wind and Pride and Prejudice and all that, and not knowing that that wasn't my reading level.
Oh, you are a black belt reader.
I skipped ahead.
So how many rejections did you get before you were accepted by a publisher?
Well, there's a step between the book and the publisher. I had to find an agent.
Right.
So I got all my rejections with the agents. I got 9 rejections, 5 no answers, and then 1, I'd like to read more. Just 1.
Just 1?
Yeah.
Isn't that person happy today?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, were you feeling when you got the rejections that, oh, well, maybe this isn't such a good idea, or did you think, I'm going to keep trying?
Absolutely, because I had no faith in the fact. I knew that I loved the story. I knew that it brought me a lot of joy. My sister really had egged me on to publish, and she's like, oh, you've got to try. It wasn't...
Was she reading, too?
She was the only one in the world who knew what I was doing. So Emily was the one. Emily is the person that is the reason why, why it's out there.
Now, so tell me this. You mentioned in the tape, how was your husband reacting to all of this?
Well, I was very, very private about this, because in my mind, this is a little bit of I've gone crazy. Like, I'm just going to write this story down, and for no purpose, I'm just having fun. So I didn't really tell anyone. Absolutely, I did not tell them I was working on vampires. So my husband, I just told him, I'm just, messing around with something, and I didn't want him to know, like, what I was doing. So he didn't, and then he just was really jealous of the computer time. It was like, we had one computer, and I was on it all the time, and that was very hard for him.
So tell me, when this hit, when, it obviously, went to the best, I noticed it at first because every week I read, the first thing I read out of the New York Times is the book section, and I would go to the bestseller page, and I kept noticing it on the bestseller, and I'm like, what is that, what is that? And then I went to my school, I have a school in Africa, and all my girls were reading it. And one of my, I call them my daughters, said to me, Mom, Oprah, you should try it because it's delicious reading. It's delicious reading, and that's how I read my first Twilight, yes.
Oh, that is so sweet.
It's delicious reading. We'll come back and talk about the movie, New Moon. We'll be right back.